Tar is a work of such electric and breathtaking craftsmanship that when you come nose to nose with the screen that projects it, you are dwarfed by its majesty. Joyously precise and philosophically rich, Tar is a rare character study that should both fill the history books and inspire the next generation of writers. It certainly motivated me. This is my analysis.
You want to dance the mask, you must service the composer.
The conversation on the separation of art and artist is at the beating heart of Tar. Every decision in the movie contributes to exploring this topic. It's very hard to have a fruitful discussion on the separation of art and artist because it's so easy for people to get defensive and dramatic about it. Roman Polanski is one of the most obvious examples to put under the light if you don't understand this topic. He is undeniably one of the greatest and most influential filmmakers in the history of cinema. Yet, after it was exposed that he was a pedophile and he fled the country for it in 1978, it has been the hot talking point of many whether or not to support his films ever again. This is one of those conversations that lends itself towards extremism, where many will go as far to try and actively discredit the value of his work altogether. Tar will now be the first thing I turn to when discussing the matter with someone. This is a film that offers great insight into the conversation in a very productive manner. This is a dialogue so skillfully thought out that it would be near impossible for anyone to have such a nuanced conversation off the top of their heads. This film believes in the power of strong principles and design and art. It has a very classical outlook, basing its worldviews off the teaching of our earliest masters like Aristotle, up to Shakespeare, and even today's Robert McKee. If you search for the film to buy tickets, you may have to look under the Cine Arts page on theater chain websites. While this is a very artistic movie, it's one that runs off the strongest structure and most classical design elements I can think of. The divide between mainstream and art house derives from a rebellious wave in cinema where people simply want to do what is different. They do not want to follow the rules, in quotes. If the popular films that make loads of cash were the original and experimental movies, then the art house crowd would turn to make superhero and action films. Usually, the films that I love fall in between these two extremes, because their inception does not exist out of a desire to abandon all pre-established principles and norms, nor does it derive from a necessity to milk a formula or appease an algorithm. In the film, our protagonist, Julia Tar, compares art to a car. She expresses that without the guidance of these principles that bring art to a place of meaning and beauty, it would be like a car without an engine. You can produce a series of moving images, but if they are not upheld by strong characters, structure, and conflict, then there is no way that the story will ever be a proper metaphor for life in the way stories are meant to be. I have a series on the 10 fundamentals of screenwriting, and this film perfectly adheres to each of those 10 lessons, because this is a car with an engine. The film begins by following Julia Tar at the peak of her creative journey. She is a composer with the rare EGOT title, meaning that she won all 4 of the big musical awards, an Emmy, a Grammy, an Oscar, and a Tony Award. Her unflinching drive to embody the grandeur of the past primes her to be mocked and torn down by the petty political climate of today. Each character around her serves to test her beliefs and put her through various trials, because she is a completely different individual at the end of the movie than she was at the beginning. Pay attention to the very last shot of the film, because director Todd Field has much to say on the subject in that one shot alone. Let's turn to the craft of the film. It's easy to point to the mastery over performance here by Blanchett, which is truly incredible, but I want to focus on 2 less obvious elements that feed into the central narrative. The first half of the film, while Julia is on top of the world, is presented through delicately coordinated long takes that allow Blanchett to command the screen. Later in the film, when she begins being scrutinized and her life is tearing apart, the editing cuts sooner with more traditional camera setups. You may not think this is relevant to the writing per se, but this is a presentation choice that really invested me in the arguments of the film, so I think it is. We see raw, untampered reality in the beginning, but we see how even those scenes from before are reintroduced, but edited down and rearranged to manipulate the meaning from the past. It takes all of the meaning out of the previous situations just to paint her as a horrific figure. This entire film is incredibly well thought out and ties into itself like this constantly. Secondly, the credits are played at the beginning of the film. This may not seem like a big deal because most movies did that decades past, but this isn't the norm anymore, and from my interpretation, I think there's a very specific reason this was done. Hear me out. The film loves classical art even for the figures behind it. Behind any great accomplishment, there is bound to be dirt if you dig deep enough, even outside of the walls of artistic accomplishments. This film refuses to demean or discredit those accomplishments, but it makes sure to acknowledge the lengths individuals had to go to get there and condemns it at the same time. The film is not hypocritical in this. Tar claims that the illusion to the audience while watching one of her performances is that the orchestra and the conductor move as one, but the orchestra, in reality, directly responds to her and would not be able to function without her timekeeping and direction. Todd Field is very clearly the one who had command over the screen that built this film up, but unlike Julia, he knows that without the brilliant musicians in the orchestra, his direction, too, would be nothing. The credits at the beginning of the film play in reverse order of what you would normally expect, giving the smallest of credits the first and foremost attention. I don't know all the behind-the-scenes details of Tar, but this suggests to me the intention of the director, and it is one of the most productive voices on the subject I have ever seen. Todd Field has created a piece of such grandeur that it should stand the test of time as one of the greatest films of the decade, but it should also be applauded for showing that not every great piece of work has to come through terrible circumstances. There are a lot of specifics about the film that I've been avoiding because I want to leave a lot for your own experience. Built into the arc of this character is a lot of surreal imagery which really connects with me. It can be somewhat cryptic at times, but if you tie everything back to the psychological effects her abuses and manipulations on others come back to have on herself, then everything will click into place for you and make more and more sense. Also, pay close attention to the song that plays during the opening credits because it gives you a lot of insight later on. If you couldn't already tell, I wholeheartedly recommend Tar. There have been a lot of movies coming out recently, so stay tuned for a bonus episode coming out Sunday on the Triangle of Sadness. Thanks for watching this episode, guys. If you enjoyed the video or found it informative, leave it a like and subscribe for more screenwriting content. If you thought it could have been better though, give it a thumbs down and then leave me some constructive criticisms in the comments below. Thanks guys, I'll see you later.